The Bible has a lot to say about how we treat specifically four groups of people: the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the immigrant or sojourner. Now, 2 years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity of going to the border in Reynosa, Mexico, with a ministry called Practice Mercy. It was my first time to actually encounter people who were fleeing other countries so that they would make the possibility or have the possibility of making it to America. I know there's much debate on immigration policy, and of course, there must be law and order at the border. But when was the last time you thought about immigration and sojourners from a biblical perspective, maybe instead of a political one? Now, I want to share with you a couple of stories to show you how proximity changes everything. In Reynosa, Mexico, there were thousands of people seeking asylum gathered in camps. I interviewed a young lady who was fleeing the cartels in Mexico. She had a little baby girl, and she was able to sit down and tell us her story of why she was fleeing and the danger that she was in. This young woman was trying to escape people with evil intentions to her and to her child. It was impossible not to have compassion. Why? Because of her story. Proximity makes all the difference. Then there were two young Russian men who were fleeing the draft in Russia. If they refused the draft and stayed in their home country, their only option was prison. They believed the war was unjust. They believed that destroying the lives of Ukrainians would be wrong. They were willing to leave family and friends and take this long journey through Mexico to find asylum in the United States so they wouldn't have to be forced to act against their conscience. Perhaps if you and I had only seen the news reports of these Russians at the border, we would have wondered why they weren't staying in their own country. But a little knowledge and proximity makes all the difference. Every person you connect with is going through something because we live in a broken world with broken families and broken relationships. You and I both know that life can be hard. People can get on your nerves. But I just want to caution you to be careful about drawing conclusions until you've heard their stories. Why? Because proximity makes all the difference. Now let's just imagine a scene in New York City. We've just stepped onto the subway, and there's a man with three of his children, and they're not behaving very well. They're running around and yelling, and we think, now can't this man at least control his children? He needs a class on how to rear his kids. But what if we sat beside him and engaged him in conversation, and he let us know that he was just returning from the hospital, that his wife had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and their kids were having a hard time processing what it was like without their mother? Now, we would be totally changing our viewpoints. Why? Because of the story. Because proximity changes everything once you hear the narrative. How often have we drawn a conclusion about someone and cast judgment, and then we hear the rest of the story and we're almost embarrassed that we even had those thoughts? How about taking time this week to engage someone you know, or maybe someone you don't know, in conversation? Maybe they'll open up to you about their story, and the mystery of their life will begin to unfold, and you'll begin to see why there's maybe their depression or sorrow or frustration. Their obnoxious behavior may make a little bit more sense because proximity or their story makes all the difference. Ephesians 4:32 states that we should be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving one another, just as God also forgave you in Christ. This week, how about being sensitive and purposeful in conversation with a friend, a stranger, or family member? Get up close, well, not physically, but emotionally, and listen to their story. I believe our hearts will grow bigger because proximity makes all the difference. Now, in a world where Christianity is becoming more and more known for all the rancor on the internet, let's be different and go looking not for a fight, but for a good listen, from one story at a time.